Now, there are roughly 35,000 special districts across the U.S. They help deliver wastewater treatment, fire protection, and many other critical services to millions of Americans, including the MWD District of Southern California, of which is critically important for my community. Now, unfortunately, special districts sometimes face challenges when trying to access and compete for federal funding due to certain technical and process problems. This bill would make it easier for special districts to access federal funds, and for that, we support this bill, and I yield back.
The ranking member yields back. We're going to pause for a moment. Representative Fallon is en route. They said he's running. And for those of you who don't know, Pat Fallon played football for Lou Holtz at Notre Dame. So I assume he's in excellent physical condition still. So we're going to yield now, once he catches his breath, to the sponsor of the bill, the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And as a point of personal privilege, we buried Coach Holtz Monday, and we want to take just 10 seconds to share with everyone. You want to talk about somebody that loved this country, loved this republic, born in humble beginnings, taught all 1,500 of his players what love is. And love is doing your best and uplifting everyone around you, because there's a distinct difference between being ambitious and striving for excellence. When you strive for excellence, you bring everybody up. And he did that, and you could see it in how many players were at that funeral yesterday. Hundreds of us. And even due to all the weather and flight cancellations and go-arounds, and it was a beautiful thing, and a tribute to Coach Holtz. And he's a dynamic force that will be sincerely missed, and I know for a fact I wouldn't be here representing nearly 800,000 Americans had I not crossed his path. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I'd like to enter two documents into the record. First, a letter of support for the National Special Districts Association.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And second is a letter of support from the North Texas Municipal Water District.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Chairman. Special districts are a unit of local government that deliver specialized services to a specific community. There are many in the state of Texas and really all over the country. For example, a special district in Texas, for instance, includes water control and improvement districts, hospital districts, crime control and prevention districts, and sports and community venue districts. There are 35,000 of these nationwide, including, as I mentioned, 3,300 in the state of Texas. California has approximately 3,000, Colorado about 3,200, Illinois about the same at 3,200. Every state in our union has special districts and numerous communities that greatly rely on them. They're beneficial to all Americans. In particularly the rural parts of the country, special purpose districts can provide emergency response and utility services. In urban areas, special districts can provide vital infrastructure or educational services. These districts are giving significant powers, including the power to acquire, purchase, sell, or lease real or personal property, sue and be sued, impose and collect taxes, issue bonds, borrow money, and contract with other entities. However, they struggle to access federal funding, and this bill changes that. H.R. 2766 would establish the first ever formal federally recognized definition for special districts. Additionally, it directs the Office of Management and Budget to issue guidance to federal agencies requiring special districts to be recognized as local government, which they are, and which would clarify how special districts are eligible to receive federal assistance. This doesn't guarantee they're going to get it. It puts them on equal footing as a county, a school district, a city, et cetera. And to be clear, this bill doesn't increase government spending, nor does it create additional federal funding programs. It simply allows these vital types of local governments to have a chance to receive funding with already existing federal programs. It merely lets them compete for them. That other local governments have access to, and it gives them the proverbial seat at the table. I encourage my colleagues to support this common sense bipartisan legislation that benefits special districts and, by extension, all Americans. And I think, Mr. Chairman, if we pass this, you will all feel better about yourselves. Thank you very much, and I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Randall.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. What many of our neighbors already know is that a lot of the government services that we rely on every day are provided by what are known as special districts. As my colleagues have mentioned, they provide water and broadband, internet, fire and EMS services, electricity, libraries, hospitals, conservation programs like rain barrels and rain garden planning to conserve water, and countless other services, and are especially important in rural communities like the one I represent. For example, I represent 6 public utility districts, all of whom are very eager to see this policy pass. Our PUDs make sure families and businesses can literally keep the lights on. They make sure rural areas of the Olympic Peninsula have reliable broadband access so that folks can attend telehealth appointments and start their businesses. And they're taking steps to harden the infrastructure and make it more resilient in the face of worsening storms, flooding, wildfires, atmospheric rivers, like the one my district is experiencing as we speak. But while they tirelessly carry out this integral work, they're ineligible to apply for many federal programs because of the lack of definition for special districts in federal law. And by providing this definition, we can help these critical government programs operate. We can ensure that folks have access to, food, library resources like the bookmobiles in rural communities, that folks can have access to broadband that has the service that they rely on. We can make sure that folks are able to have electricity that is reliable as well, and that our firefighters are able to respond to house fires and so much more. So I'm a proud sponsor of the Special Districts Grant Accessibility Act, and will be happily voting for this bill in committee and on the House floor. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Any further requests to speak? Seeing none. The question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion share, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now in favor of reporting H.R. 2766 is amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The opinion share, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman.
What? Mr. Biggs.
Request a roll call vote.
A recorded vote is ordered. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 6916, the Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act of 2025. The clerk, please designate the bill.
H.R. 6916, the Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act of 2025, a bill to amend Title 41 United States Code to identify individuals who commit certain federal felonies implicating federal programs as an excluded source on the System for Award Management Exclusions list and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection to order, the chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 6916 is offered by Mr. Comer of
Without
Kentucky.
objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I support the Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act of 2025. The federal government pays a significant amount to contractors for services needed to help agencies fulfill their missions. Receiving a contract, grant, loan, or other form of federal assistance is a privilege. However, there are individuals who use it as an opportunity to defraud the government. This bill closes a glaring loophole by prohibiting individuals convicted of certain felonies in connection with an agency, contract, grant, loan, or other financial assistance from receiving federal awards. Under H.R. 6916, fraudsters will no longer be allowed to get rich from taxpayers' hard-earned dollars. This bill also promotes transparency by requiring these individuals to be listed on the System for Awards Management Exclusion list, thus ensuring that federal agencies know these individuals are before awarding a contract or grant. This committee has investigated fraud extensively, and we have seen that as long as fraudsters are successful in obtaining contracts and federal financial assistance, they will continue to do so. We need more proactive tools to prevent these individuals from taking advantage of these loopholes that allow them to continue to get rich on the taxpayer's dime. I applaud the efforts of Representative Keith Self and Emily Randall for leading this bill in the House and bringing it before this committee. I encourage my colleagues to support this bipartisan, common sense bill, and I now recognize the ranking member for his statement.
Thank you. I also want to thank the authors of the bill. I particularly want to thank, of course, Representative Randall for her work on this legislation. Another real common sense piece of legislation. I want to support this bill. One of our most important responsibilities, of course, on this committee is ensuring that the taxes paid by hardworking Americans are spent wisely by their government. This bill would protect American tax dollars from being misused by bad actors by preventing individuals and companies convicted of certain crimes, including fraud related to the federal funds, theft of government funds, or bribery tied to federal funds, from receiving federal contracts and grants. If you break the law as it relates to fraud and abuse of government, you shouldn't benefit from federal contracts. It's as simple as that, and I want to urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill.
Ranking member yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs. Are you seek recognition? No. Okay. Ms. Randall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for scheduling this bill for a markup. I'm really glad to see my legislation with Representative Self on the list of bills that Oversight is considering today. We've sat through many hearings in this committee where my colleagues on the other side have pointed fingers at democratically led cities and states while ignoring what's happening in their own backyards and failing to come to the table with real solutions. And instead of political theater, our constituents, our neighbors, deserve us to be spending time discussing and enacting proven, vetted solutions to the actual instances of fraud where there are well-documented patterns of behavior. We shouldn't be giving people committing fraud more government contracts. The Federal Program Integrity and Fraud Prevention Act is that common sense legislation to disrupt and end patterns of fraud and prevent misuse of taxpayer dollars. This bill was developed in conjunction with the inspectors general who do the important work of rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse across the federal government every day. The IGs come across hundreds of instances where individuals were convicted of fraud related to federal government programs and were still eligible to apply for and receive federal contracts. It's frankly irresponsible and negligent for individuals convicted of fraud to be able to receive taxpayer funds and possibly misuse them again. While under current law, agencies can debar specific individuals from being eligible, this can be a long, tedious, and bureaucratic process to navigate, especially if we're talking about the need to do this for hundreds of individuals perpetrating fraud. Anecdotally, I've been told it can take upwards of 20 hours to prepare a suspension debarment package. It's the technical term for someone who has been convicted of fraud. The inspectors general carry out the investigation and do referrals to agency suspension and debarment officials, who then determines whether they take action to prevent a given individual from being eligible to apply for federal funds. Many of these officials have small staffs, smaller over this last year, making it easy for a backlog to develop. A study by inspectors general showed that 500 of 550 felony fraud convictions involving pandemic federal program funds over a 3-year period, more than 95% of those convicted were not suspended or debarred from doing business from the government. So if we're doing the math, that's over 10,000 hours of work that we will save our inspectors general through this bipartisan bill to automatically deem individuals convicted of fraud ineligible for government contracts for a minimum of 3 years. Each hour we give back to the IGs is more time they can spend addressing other instances and allegations of fraud. And I'm grateful for the leadership of the inspectors general who raised the prevalence of this issue, who told us about the problems that they're facing, and who helped us develop this bill so that it actually solves the fraud problems that they are facing and isn't just another example of political theater. Thank you, Representative Self, for your partnership on this bill, and I urge all my colleagues to support it. I yield back.
Any further debate on the bill? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment, the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Mr. Chairman.
We've got
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. The question is now on favorably reporting H.R. 6916 is amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. For what purposes the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Oh, seek roll call vote.
Recorded vote is ordered as previously announced. Further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 428, the Bonuses for Cost Cutters Act of 2025. The clerk, please designate the bill.
H.R. 428, the Bonuses for Cost Cutters Act of 2025, a bill to amend Title V United States Code to enhance the authority under which federal agencies may pay cash awards to employees for making cost-saving disclosures and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of substitute. The clerk, please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 428 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I support the Bonuses for Cost Cutters and Fraud Preventers Act, which expands incentives for federal employees to identify and disclose waste and abuse before American taxpayer dollars are spent. Federal employees are the best positioned to catch wasteful spending, but without incentives to disclose such spending, they may not speak up. That's why Congress created cash awards in 1981 to encourage employees to take action. This program was so successful that it was made permanent just over a decade later. The use of these authorities has resulted in creative ideas coming from agency employees themselves, saving millions of taxpayer dollars over the years. Such cost-saving ideas have included allowing veterans to use otherwise safe discarded medicine, eliminating wasteful printing of the Federal Register, and much more. And now Congress can do more to expand the cost-saving potential of these authorities. H.R. 428 is amended to increase incentives for federal employees by allowing cash awards for reporting wasteful spending and improper payments before funds go out the door. As we have heard over and over again, the best way to recover misspent taxpayer dollars is not to misspend them in the first place. I support this initiative, which preserves Congress's constitutional role in the appropriations process and helps reduce wasteful spending. I thank Representative Fleischman from Tennessee for bringing these reforms to our committee and for working with us to further improve the bill. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I now recognize the ranking member.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I also support this legislation. The bill would save American taxpayers money by encouraging public servants to identify cost savings in federal programs and would increase an existing award program cap of $10,000 up to $20,000. Employees who eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse would qualify for cash awards for their efforts. Again, this is a good piece of legislation, and it's a thoughtful way of putting the American people first as it relates to spending our tax dollars. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Ranking member yields back. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter of support dated March 18th from the National Taxpayers Union endorsing H.R. 428, Bonuses for Cost Cutters Act of H.R. 1722, the $1 billion Boondoggle Act, H.R. 2069, the Stop Secret Spending Act, H.R. 4642, the Fiscal Contingency Preparedness Act, and H.R. 7934, the Settlement Agreement Information Database Act. Without objection, so ordered. Do any members seek recognition on H.R. 428? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now favorably reporting H.R. 428 is amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. For what purposes, Mr. Biggs, seek recognition?
Roll call vote, please, sir.
A recorded vote is ordered by Mr. Biggs from Arizona. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 1722, the $1 billion Boondoggle Act of 2025. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 1722, the $1 billion Boondoggle Act of 2025, a bill to require an annual report of taxpayer-funded projects that are over budget and behind schedule.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1722 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purpose of further amendment. I recognize myself for the purpose of, for 5 minutes, for the purpose of making a statement on the bill. Congress must ensure that every taxpayer dollar is spent efficiently. Each year, the Government Accountability Office reports government projects that are above cost projection or behind schedule. Such projects include federal information technology programs and National Nuclear Security Administration projects. However, there are likely additional government boondoggles flying under the radar, falling years behind in schedule, running billions of dollars over budget. The $1 billion Boondoggle Act will keep policymakers and the public better informed about government-funded projects that are significantly behind schedule or over budget. We cannot fix what we do not know is broken. The bill directs agencies to report on projects that are more than 5 years behind schedule or have expenditures that are at least $1 billion more than the original cost estimate. Agencies must also provide an explanation for the delay in the project's completion or an increase in its cost. The Office of Management Budget is then required under the bill to submit an annual report to Congress summarizing these troubled federal projects. Congress has a duty to oversee the federal government in efficiency and waste. This bill informs policymakers and allows Congress to address failing government projects before further taxpayer dollars are misused. A similar bill passed the House in the 118th Congress, and the identical Senate bill, sponsored by Senator Ernst from Iowa, just recently passed the Senate this past December. I want to thank Representatives Miller Meeks and Ansari for their work on the House companion bill. It's time to get this bill sent to the President's desk. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I now recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this legislation, which is also co-led by Representative Ansari. Now, Congress has a duty to ensure taxpayer dollars are spent efficiently, transparently, and with real accountability for results. We know this bill would require that Congress be notified of any project that is more than 5 years behind schedule or $1 billion over budget. And it will help Congress perform critical oversight roles on behalf of the American public. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any member seek recognition? Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs from Arizona.
Mr. Chairman, I support this bill. Right now, taxpayers are on the hook for more than $163 billion worth of cost overruns, and this will be a great attack on that. And I mean, there's some specific ones. We think of the California high-speed rail line that has jumped in costs. An additional project in Boston that went from $400 million to $1.4 billion. And so, Mr. Chairman, I support this and ask that you allow into the record that a piece called Taxpayers on the Hook for $163 billion worth of project overruns, including controversial Fed renovations.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none. Question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. The question is now in favor of reporting H.R. 1722 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Request a roll call.
A recorded vote is ordered by Mr. Biggs from Arizona. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 4642, the Fiscal Contingency Preparedness Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 4642, the Fiscal Contingency Preparedness Act, a bill to require the Secretary of the Treasury, in coordination with the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, to examine the ability of the federal government to respond to potential fiscal shocks and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of substitute. The clerk please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4642 is offered by Mr. Comer of
Without
Kentucky.
objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill and the amendment. H.R. 4642 is a sound, common sense bill that will increase transparency and help Congress and the executive branch be better prepared for future national emergencies. As we all know, the United States is $38 trillion in debt, and that debt is growing. Much of America's debt stems from Congress and the executive's responses to the country's last two major crises, the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. In response to each emergency, federal spending drastically increased, and that spending massively increased our national debt. For all we know, another major crisis is around the corner, and we cannot afford to respond with the same lack of fiscal irresponsibility. Harder choices than ever may have to be made. This bill will help us be better prepared. For the first time, it will require that the Department of the Treasury, in its annual fiscal report to Congress, to examine and inform Congress of the fiscal risks and impacts of a federal response to a wide range of potential national and international crises. Armed with that knowledge, Congress and the executive branch will be better positioned to know ahead of time how much fiscal flexibility they will have to respond to such a crisis, if and when it comes. As a result, they'll be better able to take prudent measures in advance to help make more fiscal space available to address the crises. As chairman of this committee, I hope that includes eliminating every last bit of waste, fraud, and abuse out of our federal spending so taxpayer resources are preserved to respond to taxpayers' genuine needs. Importantly, Treasury must examine and report on these issues in coordination with the Office of Management and Budget. And as an additional safeguard to assure accuracy, the bill requires the Government Accountability Office to review Treasury's methodology and report its findings to the House and Senate budget committees. I want to thank Representative Ben Klein from Virginia and Representative Jared Golden for their leadership on this issue and bringing this bill to consideration. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan legislation. I recognize the ranking member for his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I support this legislation as well. Well, when I was mayor and the COVID-19 pandemic hit, along with the horrific shock to the country, the pandemic split our economy, hit our city's budget, and our ability to deliver critical services. Now, we learned lessons, and among them is that we must always be prepared. Disasters happen. They're going to continue to happen, whether it's economic depressions, a crisis around energy, a pandemic, or a natural disaster. Now, this would help ensure that we are prepared to respond to economic recessions, pandemics, cyber attacks, and more. We must and can be ready for anything. As this bill moves to the floor, I want to be clear that as we've learned from the pandemic and other disasters, responding to these incidents means making sure that we have strong programs in place to protect the American people and to provide help when we need it. We should not be using fiscal disaster readiness as an excuse to push through cuts which leave us more vulnerable. I urge my colleagues to support the bill in front of us, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record statements of support from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, Americans for Prosperity, National Taxpayers Union Foundation, Tax Foundation, Millennial Debt Foundation, Economic Policy Innovation Center, Cato Institute, Concord Action, R Street Institute, Peterson Solutions Fund, Bipartisan Policy Action Center, Progressive Policy Institute, and the Problem Solvers Caucus, endorsing H.R. 4642, the Fiscal Contingency Preparedness Act. Without objection, so ordered. Do any member seek recognition on the bill? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now in favor of reporting H.R. 4642 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Request a roll call.
A recorded vote is ordered by Mr. Biggs. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 2069, the Stop Secret Spending Act of 2025. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 2069, the Stop Secret Spending Act of 2025, a bill to amend the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act of 2006 to ensure that other transaction agreements are reported to usaspending.gov and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2069 is offered by Mr. Comer.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I support the Stop Spending Act of 2025, which requires federal agencies to report complete and accurate information to usaspending.gov on how they spend congressionally appropriated funds. Since 2006, agencies have been required to be more transparent with how they are spending taxpayer dollars. The Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, as later amended by the Data Act of 2014, established usaspending.gov, a public assures the American people that agencies are using their hard-earned money appropriately. In short, transparency helps build trust in government. Unfortunately, over the years, we've found that there are gaps in what gets reported to usaspending.gov. Increasingly, federal agencies have used spending authorities known as Other Transaction Agreements, or OTAs. OTAs are not subject to certain federal acquisition laws and requirements, and most importantly, are not required to be reported to usaspending.gov under current law. The GAO has found that agencies use different methods to report the billions of dollars in spending related to OTAs. However, this reporting has been inconsistent, and it's unknown if this information is even complete. That means we do not have full transparency over how billions of dollars are spent by federal agencies. The Stop Secret Spending Act corrects this issue by requiring OTA spending to be reported to usaspending.gov. The bill also requires agencies to report annually on types of funding that previously were unreported for a variety of exemptions. Agencies will need to report the amounts and the reasons why these appropriated dollars were not reported. This provides more transparency to the public and allows all of us to hold agencies accountable. Lastly, this bill restores the requirement for agency inspectors general to review the entirety of data submitted to usaspending.gov to ensure that it is complete and accurate. Transparency does not mean anything if the spending information that gets reported is not complete or accurate. I thank Representatives Barry Moore from Alabama, Jimmy Panetta for leading this bill in the House of Representatives. I urge all my colleagues to support this common sense bipartisan bill, and I yield to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also support this bill. The American people work hard to make ends meet, particularly with costs skyrocketing and failed policies both at home and abroad. The American people deserve to know how the federal government is spending their money. This bill would increase transparency on how taxpayer dollars are spent by requiring agencies to report each year on federal spending that is not currently disclosed on usaspending.gov. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the Center for Procurement Advocacy dated March 16, 2026, endorsing H.R. 2069, the Stop Secret Spending Act. Without objection, so ordered. Any member seek recognition on the bill? To speak on the bill? Seeing none. The question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The question is now in favorably reporting H.R. 2069 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Mr. Chairman.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Request a roll call.
A recorded vote is ordered by Mr. Biggs. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 7934, the Settlement Agreement Information Database Act of 2026. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 7934, the Settlement Agreement Information Database Act, a bill to amend Chapter 3 of Title 5 United States Code to require the publication of settlement agreements and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, so ordered. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of substitute. The clerk please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 7934 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I'm going to yield to the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Palmer, but before I do, Gary, when Pat Fallon came in, I announced to the world that he played college football at Notre Dame for a famous coach, Lou Holtz. And I feel like I need to recognize and announce to the world, if they didn't already know, you played college football in Alabama for another famous coach, Bear Bryant. If I played college football, I would say that in every opening statement about myself, but I didn't.
Before Lou Holtz went to Notre Dame, he was the head coach at Arkansas, and we played him for the national championship.
Yeah.
And beat them. And Lou Holtz told me this himself. He said when Coach Bryant walked across the field at the end of the game, he said, "Lou, that's the best game we played all year." And Coach Holtz said, "Well, I'm just glad I was there to see it."
Chair recognizes the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The federal government's duty to serve the public interest relies on transparency and accountability to all its citizens. Due to poor record keeping, however, it is impossible for Congress and the public to determine the comprehensive impact of federal settlement agreements and consent decrees. States, municipalities, industry stakeholders, and taxpayers are often directly affected by the terms of these agreements, but are prevented from accessing the details of these settlements and decrees. I personally encountered this problem as far back as 2008 when I worked at a think tank. Federal courts, agencies, and state and local municipalities were unable to identify the number of consent decrees Alabama was legally bound to enforce. We were told the cases were only filed by case name or number, and accordingly, it would be impossible to retrieve Alabama-specific cases. Currently, most of the public's access to federal settlement information is based on individual agency discretion, and information usually is issued in the form of a press release. Worse yet, there are no uniform standards for internal or public record keeping across federal agencies. In some cases, heads of agencies will also declare a settlement to be confidential and seal the contents without providing any explanation. It is therefore impossible for the public to determine the comprehensive costs and outcomes of federal settlement agreements. The Bipartisan Settlement Agreement Information Database Act, or SED Act, will address this problem. The bill establishes a centralized and electronic database of settlement agreements entered into by federal agencies. Basic information about settlement agreements already collected by federal agencies, such as payments and dates, will be searchable for the public online through this database. This will include agreements that impose payment obligations of $10 million or more to a settling party entered into after January 2015. In circumstances where the terms of an agreement or decree are deemed confidential, the bill requires agency heads to issue a written public statement justifying the non-disclosure. H.R. 7934 provides long overdue transparency and accountability standards to federal settlement agreements and consent decrees. I thank my friend and colleague, Mr. Mfume, for his leadership in joining me as co-lead for this bipartisan SAID Act. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Jim yields back. Recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also support this bill. This bill, as we know, would create a database of settlement agreements entered into by federal agencies with the victims of violations of federal civil or criminal law. Heads of agencies would be required to submit details about the types of settlement agreements they have entered to, the parties who are involved, and specific violations and any amounts paid. This is good for transparency and accessibility of the public. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. H.R. 7934, the Settlement Agreement Information Database Act, is a common sense measure that increases transparency and enhances public participation in government policy making. Transparency and public participation are vital to ensure the public's continued trust in our government. But for years, they have been undermined by federal agencies that have entered into legally binding settlement agreements and consent decrees and litigation over government action. These agreements and decrees typically result from secret negotiations with activist plaintiffs that diminish transparency and essentially prevent the public from participating in important policy decisions. It's currently impossible for Congress and the public to determine the comprehensive impact of these settlement agreements and consent decrees on state and local governments and private sector entities that must follow mandates the settlements and decrees require. The burdens imposed can be difficult to see and understand, but state and local governments, industry stakeholders, and taxpayers can be directly affected for years by these settlements and decrees, even though they were unable to provide input. This legislation seeks to correct that problem. The bill requires federal agencies to publish information regarding settlement agreements and consent decrees on a publicly available electronic database. Under the bill's requirements, these agency databases will include dates, payments, attorney fee awards, and a list of state and local governments identified by the agreements and decrees. Currently, agencies typically release such information at their discretion and often publicize only facts that reflect favorably upon the agency. Furthermore, the terms to which agencies agree are often deemed confidential. This bill requires an agency head to submit annual reports to Congress and make publicly available information stating the basis for maintaining confidentiality, allowing for additional scrutiny. This will increase the transparency of the federal government and shine a much-needed light on settlement agreements and consent decrees into which government agencies enter. I again want to thank the sponsor of the bill, Representative Palmer, for his longstanding leadership on this issue, and Representative Mfume for helping push these reforms in this committee. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. Do any other members seek recognition? Ms. Ansari.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I will discuss H.R. 1722, the $1 billion Boondoggle Act of 2025. It's one of the previous bills.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am glad to see this bill that I'm co-leading with Congresswoman Miller Meeks being considered in this markup. H.R. 1722, the $1 billion Boondoggle Act, is a sensible bipartisan measure to do what DOGE and Elon Musk were unable to: hold the federal government accountable for projects that are way behind schedule and over budget. Specifically, our bill would require the public disclosure of every taxpayer-funded project that is $1 billion or more over budget or 5 years or more behind schedule. Under this administration, we have children and family having their Medicaid, SNAP, and other essential programs ripped away. We all deserve to know what the federal government is spending funds on instead, and if those dollars are going to good use. And it's not just this administration. For years, both Democrats and Republicans have criticized the federal government for wasting taxpayer dollars on costly and delayed projects that have to go through mountains of red tape to get approved. Although the corruption throughout the federal government right now is stunning and unprecedented, this is truly a long-lasting issue that we need to deal with. That's why this bill previously passed out of this committee, and I hope it will again. I support H.R. 1722 because it would immediately inform the public about the scale, scope, and extent of bloated projects in the federal government and expose corruption within the Trump administration. I want to again thank my co-lead, Congresswoman Miller Meeks, for her work on this bill, and I yield back. Thank you.
Any further members seek recognition? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment in the nature of the substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion share, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Question is now in favor of reporting H.R. 7934 is amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. For what purposes, Mr. Biggs? Seek recognition.
Request a roll call.
Recorded vote is ordered by Mr. Biggs. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 5525, the Stop D.C. Capital Authoritarian Motor Vehicle Enforcement and Restoration of Autonomy, or CAMERA Act. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 5525, the Stop DC Camera Act, a bill to repeal the authority of the District of Columbia to use automated traffic enforcement systems and to erect signage prohibiting right turns at red traffic signal.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection to order, the chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of substitute. The clerk will please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5525 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. The substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of further amendment. I now recognize the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill simply repeals local D.C. laws relating to automated traffic enforcement, as well as the D.C. mayor's authorization to use traffic enforcement systems and issue fines with these cameras. In turn, the bill prohibits Washington, D.C. from operating its traffic enforcement camera program, and two, repeals D.C. law currently prohibiting drivers from making right turns on red. And be clear, while D.C.'s, I said operating, they're actually not really operating. These are two companies that they've contracted with, one, Vera Mobility out of Mesa, Arizona, and the other one, Hayden AI Technologies out of San Francisco, California. So the city's fleecing its residents and everybody that visits D.C., and folks in Arizona and San Francisco are making a boatload of money on it. The residents and commuters of Washington are both sick and tired of being fleeced for hundreds of dollars of petty automated traffic fines, all in the name of alleged safety. With thousands of drivers commuting across the district daily, it is no wonder that the city relies on 536 and counting total traffic enforcement cameras across 5.5 square miles, which generate millions of dollars of revenues from the people that can likely least afford it. According to public traffic data, D.C. traffic fatalities for 2023 were 52, and 2024 were 52. Were the highest they've been since 2007, which was 54. So it's not getting safer out there, folks. Despite a drop in traffic fatalities for 2025 and the D.C. mayor's fabricated Vision Zero camera plan to increase pedestrian safety, anyone with common sense can see there is zero correlation between these fatality figures and the hundreds of cameras installed in the district over more than 25 years. A study by the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration found that only 0.2% of all nationwide road fatalities from 1982 to 1992 occurred at an intersection permitting a right turn on red. In 2020, insurance provider AAA deemed the city's enforcement of moving violation and parking tickets as predatory. And to this day, city data showing how these cameras have made drivers safe is quite frankly non-existent. They don't provide any data. Meanwhile, a 2025 Consumer Affairs ranking placed Washington, D.C. in first place for the worst traffic in the United States, with D.C. having the longest average commute time in the country, 33.5 minutes, and the second longest average commute time in the country, 6 hours and 35 minutes behind Los Angeles. Ladies and gentlemen, 5.5 miles of Washington, D.C. To put that in perspective, a typical D.C. Commuter spends 72 hours a year of their lives lost in traffic in D.C. According to the D.C. Chief Financial Officer, the city generated $139.5 million from automated traffic enforcement in FY 2023, $213 million in FY 24, and $267 million in 25. As is, these suspiciously sensitive, seldomly recalibrated cameras issue speeding tickets for $100 to $500, depending on speed over the limit and road type. Additionally, the district's red light camera program fines drivers $150 for a signal pass, $100 for no right on red, and $100 for failing to stop before a right on a red, even if there's no sign, no signage, but you still get fined, and nobody's there. In 2025 alone, the city issued 3,160,690 total tickets, with its total issued fines coming in at $366.3 million. More than $100 million of these fines were issued in just 6 months of the year, with more than 80% of the tickets being issued to out-of-state drivers. How convenient. It's called taxation without representation, folks. As is, these automated cameras are expected to yield over $1 billion between 24 and 28, with revenue declining over time as people find out where they are. Additionally, as of May 24, drivers owed nearly $1.3 billion in fines and penalties to the district. In September, this committee successfully passed 2 amendments with bipartisan support, striking all D.C. code language, permitting the city to install the use of traffic cameras, and instituting a right turn on red ban that began in January. I express my support of the chairman's ANS to the bill, and my goal is to bring driving autonomy back to the district, not only for the people that live there, but for people that visit. These cameras are a shameless money grab that can continuously deter tourists, aggravate commuters, and attack and defraud local residents with hundreds of dollars in fines. I urge support of passage of the bill, and I yield the balance, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. Just want to, again, I think something that's really important, and we continue to bring this up in this committee, is that the district have the ability to govern themselves. I oppose this bill, which, again, another attack on the 700,000 D.C. residents and on democratic principles. Now, I personally have strong opinions as a former mayor on these types of cameras, and I think they can be debated, I think, in a way that is reasonable and responsible in different cities and in different communities. I will agree that they can also be misused in many cases, and I've seen that happen in cities and communities. At the same time, I believe that the decisions for the district should be left to the district and the community. DC's locally elected officials are accountable to DC residents, and local leaders should be empowered to address local matters without Congress continuously interfering. We should honestly be focused on ways that we can ensure the support that they need, that the district needs. That should be our focus, not continuously repealing bills as it relates to DC traffic laws, criminal justice laws, and other laws that continue to be in front of us today. Again, I'll say it again, if we should be considering anything, it should be statehood for the district at this moment. I urge my colleagues to oppose H.R. 5525.
Gentleman yields back. Before I recognize Mr. Higgins, Mr. Perry, do you have a...
Yeah, I just want to enter into the record, if I could please, Mr. Chairman, this article from the D.C. Policy Center entitled "Predominantly Black Neighborhoods in D.C. Bear the Brunt of Automated Traffic Enforcement."
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Mr. Higgins from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate my colleague, Representative Perry, for introducing this bill. Mr. Chairman, I oppose all camera-based traffic code enforcement. So wherever I have opportunity to vote against it, I will. To oppose it, I will. There's a huge difference, Mr. Chairman, between traffic camera surveillance of intersections, which are incredibly valuable for investigating vehicle crashes and solving crimes, identifying vehicles involved in high-speed pursuits or in criminal behavior, identifying vehicles fleeing from criminal scenes. There are many, many circumstances where the technologies of cameras mounted throughout a municipality or a jurisdictional authority can be very helpful. So that's a huge difference from traffic code enforcement. That's essentially remote enforcement of alleged traffic violations and issuance of fines. That's wrong. We should oppose it across the board. It doesn't reflect even the basic standards of law enforcement professionalism. Whatever side of the aisle you're on, you would seek a responsible and accountable interaction between a professional certified law enforcement officer and a citizen, in this case a vehicle operator, was alleged to have committed some violation. So a traffic enforcement camera removes the observation. There's no initial observation by a post-certified police officer. There's no personal interaction between that observing police officer and the vehicle operator. There's remote enforcement, and the recipient of that fine really has no option other than to just pay the fine. They say that you have an option, but you really don't, because it's an incredible intrusion upon your life to have to go show up at a court for, if you're actually working, young man, it's an incredible intrusion on your life to actually show up in court at some city that you visited and you receive an automated traffic ticket from. How would my fellow citizens feel if a police officer pulls you over, he turns on his lights, you pull over, and instead of walking to your passenger window and knocking on the window and you put the window down a little bit these days, that's what's cool, and you say, "Good afternoon, sir or ma'am, I'm Captain Clay Higgins, St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office. The reason I stopped you is because you weaved 2 times over into the other lane. I want to make sure you're okay. You okay to drive?" But instead of an interaction that might start off like that, you have no interaction. The police officer pulls you over, and you sit there, and he just walks up to your car and like sticks a citation to your windshield and leaves. How would you feel about that? Because that's what's happening with these traffic cameras. So it's impossible to support the long-held principles that we pursue regarding professional and community interactions between law enforcement and the citizens that we intend to serve. It's impossible to support those principles and support automated traffic camera enforcement and fining of the citizenry. So I appreciate the bill being brought. I like the chance to vote against this stuff. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly oppose this undemocratic and paternalistic bill, which would repeal 2 traffic laws enacted by the District of Columbia. Today's markup is the 3rd markup this Congress of a bill that would interfere with these 2 laws. Last year, this committee passed a bill that would, among other things, repeal these 2 laws. And the House Committee on Appropriations passed a bill that would prohibit D.C. from using local funds to carry out these 2 laws. Over the past 5 years, the sponsor of this bill has tried repeatedly to repeal or block these 2 laws, as well as another D.C. traffic law. But he is not the first Republican to try to repeal D.C.'s automatic traffic enforcement law. Republicans have been trying to repeal that law since 2014. the 700,000 district residents, the majority of whom are black and brown, are capable and worthy of governing themselves. If residents do not like how the members of the D.C. Council vote, residents can vote them out of office. That is democracy. If D.C. residents do not like how members of Congress vote on local D.C. matters, residents cannot vote them out of office. That is the antithesis of democracy. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record statements opposing this bill from D.C. Mayor and 12 members of the D.C. Council.
Without objections, ordered.
The substance of this bill should be irrelevant since there is never justification for Congress to legislate on local matters, but I will discuss it. D.C. is not unique in either using automated traffic enforcement or prohibiting turning right on red light. For example, automated traffic enforcement is used by hundreds of jurisdictions in about half the states, both red and blue, including in the home states of both the chairman and sponsors of this bill. According to an automated enforcement program listed, a checklist issued by the Governor's Highway Safety Association, advocates for highway and automobile traffic safety, AAA and the National Safety Automatic Enforcement is an effective tool to make roads safer. D.C. residents have all the obligations of American citizenship, including paying federal taxes, serving on juries, and registering with the Selective Service. Yet, Congress denies them full local self-government and voting representation in Congress. The only solution to this undemocratic treatment is to grant D.C. statehood. Congress has the authority to admit D.C. as a state. D.C. statehood bill, H.R. 51, would reduce the size of the federal district from 68 square miles to 2 square miles, consisting of the White House, the Capitol, the Supreme Court, and the National Mall. This residential and commercial area of D.C. would be a new state. I urge members to vote no on H.R. 5525, Free D.C. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I associate myself with the statements of Mr. Higgins and Mr. Perry, and while I don't dispute that there are many times that traffic, that you can have a speed trap with police officers, just like you can have one with cameras, to raise revenue as opposed to necessarily making sure that traffic moves freely and safely. That's not what this is about, though. I mean, this is about 547 automated traffic cameras that bring in hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and as one report has noted, that generates more money than alcohol, cigarette, motor vehicle, fuel and estate taxes, and all revenue from licenses and permits and personal property taxes combined. That's why they do this. It isn't for safety, and it's a problem. And it's one of the reasons that in my home state I've opposed every use, and actually sponsored and was able to get laws taking down photo radar enforcement. So I couldn't get it done completely, but we got it significantly done on any state highway in Arizona. Mr. Chairman, I urge people to vote yes on this, and I would submit for the record a couple of articles, one called Just One Washington, D.C. Camera Alone Pulled in Nearly $10 million last year, and another one, D.C. issues record $1 billion in traffic and parking tickets. AAA calls it predatory.
Without objection, so ordered.
Yield back.
Yield back. Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to start by saying that I strongly support D.C. statehood and have consistently opposed any bills infringing on D.C. home rule, and I will continue to do so. That being said, I also want to be clear that I have serious reservations about how traffic cameras across the country are being operated. In Washington state, my home state, there have been reports that ICE and Border Patrol are accessing flock safety camera data without authorization and without local agencies' awareness. I don't think we've seen any sort of public accounting from Flock on how and why that data was shared, or from ICE and Border Patrol on why they accessed that data and what they used it for. The law that would be repealed by this bill authorizes automatic traffic enforcement for moving infractions, such as running red lights, speeding, running stop signs, and it's my understanding that those cameras are not operated by Flock. I plan to vote against this DC Stop Camera Act because I support DC Home Rule and because I believe that Congress should take a systematic nationwide approach to how we address this issue and not dictate special rules for one city that no other city is subject to. But I would like to see this committee have a serious conversation about the weaponization of traffic camera data and investigate the misuse of this data. It seems like I have colleagues across the dais who also have a concern with traffic camera data more broadly and may have a meaningful discussion. We need to put serious data privacy and civil rights restrictions in place to prevent future abuses. But I will be voting no on this bill. I yield back.
Yield back. Recognize the ranking member.
Thank you. I just want to, obviously I made my comments, but I just was compelled to just add to Representative Randall. I just wanted, for the record, also just note that I share the same concerns, and so I strongly support DC having their ability to rule themselves and to pass laws that benefit their residents, and I will continue to be consistent on that. But I just want to uplift some of the comments from my colleagues in the majority, that I also share deep concerns about camera technology, the way it's used. Having served as mayor and worked with our own police department, I think we had challenges with these types of cameras. We actually removed them in our city when I was mayor. We began a process of removing these cameras from the community because of the concerns, and we worked with law enforcement in that process. So I'm proud of that. And so if there are additional conversations that can happen in this committee as it relates to some standards, as it relates to this type of data sharing, I would welcome that as well.
Yield back. I recognize myself. I support the Perry bill, and I'll be happy to yield any additional time to Mr. Perry, the sponsor of the bill, if he wants it.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to reiterate again that 80% of the fines go to people from out of town, out of state, if you want to call it that, even though D.C. is not a state. Where do the people that come across the country, from across the country to their nation's capital, where do they get a vote on the D.C. Council, on D.C. leadership, and on the cameras? As my colleague, Mr. Higgins, a respected law enforcement officer, opined, once you leave town, you're not going to fly back, you're not going to drive back to pay a $100 fine, you're just going to pay it, which is why this is done. This is done to raise revenue. It has nothing to do with safety. As I said before, there are two companies on the West Coast, essentially, that are running this operation for Washington, D.C., and everybody's making money except the people that are being fleeced, whether they live in town or out of town. We certainly support D.C.'s ability to govern themselves. But unfortunately, in this case, what they're doing is fleecing everybody that comes to Washington, D.C., and we don't support that. We also don't support the fleecing of their residents, for which they don't want to raise taxes for the programs which they want to impose. And that's their business, I suppose. But let's just open this up and make it very clear to everybody that you're being charged a tax one way or the other to pay for these programs, and of course, you're not voting for that tax. They don't want to put a tax increase on, they don't want to have to vote for that because voters won't like that. So they just collect the tax, unfairly and unequally through like no right turn on red. There's not even a sign there. Like, people who come from other states, if there's a sign there, I'm sure they would be happy to comply. But you don't know that you're not allowed to turn right on red. And of course, there's no safety infraction there in most of the intersections. So look, if D.C. can govern itself appropriately, the federal government by Constitution will butt out. But as you all know, especially residents from D.C., the Constitution is very clear about who's supposed to be governing D.C. And so this is absolutely appropriate and in accordance with the law. You might not like that law. You might not like the Constitution of the United States. We have a process for changing it. And I would encourage those who don't like those things to go ahead and engage in that process. But until then, we're going to make sure that we're looking out for the citizens of the United States of America and the citizens of D.C., whether the D.C. government wants to do that or not. And I'll yield the balance back to the chairman.
And conclude. Any further members? Any members seeking further debate? Seeing none, the question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Question is now in favor of reporting H.R. 5525 is amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Mr. Chairman.
All those. Recorded vote has been ordered by Ranking Member Garcia. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Our next item for consideration is H.R. 6399 to direct the United States Postal Service to designate a single unique zip code for Highland City, Utah. The clerk will please designate the bill.
H.R. 6399, a bill to direct the United States Postal Service to designate a single unique zip code for Highland City, Utah.
Without objection, the bill should be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection to order, the chair would ask himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk, please designate the amendment.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 6399 is offered by Mr. Comer of Kentucky.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purpose of further amendment. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for a statement on the bill. H.R. 6399 designates a single unique zip code for Highland City, Utah. H.R. 6399 will designate a zip code for the city and is the product of Representative Kennedy's advocacy. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter of support from Mayor and City Council of Highland City requesting the unique zip code designation established by this bill. I now recognize the ranking member. If he does not seek recognition, any member seek recognition? I also want to enter into the record, or ask unanimous consent to enter into the record, a letter from Utah County Commission in support of H.R. 6399 without objection, so ordered. Seeing no further requests to speak, the question is now on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is now in favor of reporting H.R. 6399 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Biggs.
Recorded vote, please.
Recorded vote is ordered by Mr. Biggs. As previously announced, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. Pursuant to the previous order, the committee stands in recess subject to the call of the chair. But before we stand in recess, the chair recognize Mr. Palmer.
Mr. Chairman, I request to enter a document into the record, a list of current agency settlement databases.
Without objection to order. Again, pursuant to the previous order, the committee stands in recess to the subject of the call of the chair. We plan to reconvene to vote on all these bills at 2:30 sharp. Committee's in recess.